Hello and good morning to everyone. In particular, good morning and welcome to Dr. Rania Al-Mashat, who is the Minister of International Cooperation at the Arab Republic of Egypt. But if you did not know that, you shouldn't be watching the webinar. So, Minister, it's very good to see you this morning, albeit from a distance. Welcome. I'm Ian Gray. I'll be hosting this morning's thing. So I'd also like to say a particular welcome to Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, who is the UK Prime Minister's Trade Envoy to Egypt. And we are also joined on the panel by Helmi Ghazi, and Helmi is the Managing Director and Head of Global Banking at HSBC Bank in Egypt. We've got some other people helping us on the panel, but I've just run through who the main speakers will be. I'm also running through a slightly longer introduction to give those who are arriving a fraction late to get here. But my intention this morning is to kick off, first of all, with asking for some words of welcome from you, Sir Geoffrey, and then we'll head over for a very brief overview on some of the economic impact of what's going on in the world today from Helmi. And then I'll be handing over to you, Minister, if that will work for you. So, gentlemen on the panel and madam, thank you so very much indeed for joining us this morning. We have over 100 people who have registered to be here, and as we were kicking off, they were all beginning to pile in and connect. So if I may, if I can turn to you, Sir Geoffrey, to kick us off on what looks like what will be an interesting morning. It will be, I should just say for everyone, we will have a number of introductory speeches from the main panelists, and then we will be working on Q&A. So, Sir Geoffrey, if I may hand over to you. Thank you.
Ian, thank you very much for your introduction, and to the Egyptian British Chamber of Commerce for hosting this event. And thank you also to the Minister for taking time out of a very busy schedule to join us, and to Helmi as well, who, as always, has been very helpful in supporting UK-Egypt trade links. So, Minister, we look forward to hearing what you have to say. Clearly, we in the UK are in the early stages of emerging from the COVID-19 pandemic. It is indeed early days in terms of our economic recovery, but we're also at a very crucial stage in our negotiations with the European Union in relation to Brexit. And that, of course, will be about the future relationship with the EU. And in parallel with this, we are, of course, continuing our negotiations with the Egyptian government about the future trade arrangements with Egypt. And these are making good progress, and we are very hopeful that in the end agreement will be reached, and we will have a clarity on the nature of that relationship going forward, albeit it will be very much an evolving situation. We will be very interested in hearing what you have to say, Minister, about your role as Minister for International Cooperation. Clearly, in my role as UK Trade Envoy, I want to see cooperation between Egypt and the UK in both trade and investment enhanced. I am passionate about the opportunities that exist for further trade, to grow the level of trade between the United Kingdom and Egypt, but also to attract investment in both directions. Clearly, that will be influenced to a degree by what is happening as we seek to recover from the economic impact of COVID-19. But we are still positive about our future trading relationship with Egypt. And I think this kind of event, Ian, is important in terms of keeping the lines of communication open, but also informing British companies about the opportunities in Egypt. And Minister and Helmi will both be looking forward to what you have to say in this regard. I hope to be able to visit Egypt again later this year. It's been unfortunate that we haven't been able to have those physical contacts that we've enjoyed in recent years, but we look forward to that resuming. And I believe that UK companies continue to have an interest in trading with Egypt, and at this very moment we're working on a number of projects which will bring major investment to Egypt by British companies. So all in all, Ian, I'm positive about the future, despite the challenges that we face, and very much looking forward to both what Helmi has to say and of course the Minister. Unfortunately, I will need to leave at about 10:45 because I've got to catch a flight to Belfast, or to London, sorry, to be at Westminster. I'm still in Northern Ireland, but I'm hoping to travel to London at lunchtime today. So thank you, and to all of the participants who are joining us on this webinar, thank you for taking the time and for your continued interest in Egypt.
Geoffrey, thank you for that, and I'm sure we wouldn't be here if we didn't echo your positive view going forward. I have one thing I should say. There was another thanks I should have offered early on, which is to His Excellency Ambassador Harigado, because he and his team have actually been extremely helpful to us in the Chamber in actually setting this up with the Minister and everything else. And I'm in checking, I know the Ambassador is actually with us, and when we meet physically we can always see who's there, so I'm really trying to highlight for those of us who can't. So Helmi, if I can turn to you for a bit of background, and thanks to you for your support in helping today be possible.
Thank you very much, Ian, and I appreciate the opportunity to be with you and Her Excellency Dr. Rania and Sir Geoffrey this morning. So this situation we find ourselves in is disruption on a scale that we have never seen. So from a banker's perspective, you know, COVID-19 has upended how banks manage risk. So as we got hit by a mix of severe economic contraction and shutdowns, volatility in the financial markets, oil price crash, to name just a few, and the path to recovery remains highly uncertain. So the problem, of course, is particularly acute where the virus is reshaping whole industries such as travel and hospitality, and probably there's more to come. Obviously, this is leading to fundamental shifts in economic and social behavior and will result in structural changes to how we work, learn, shop, travel, and other activities. And actually what we're seeing is what may have taken years to evolve is likely to become a reality sooner rather than later. What we are seeing as HSBC, I mean, generally globally, is for businesses savvy enough to harness these trends, it will be a time that provide great opportunities, and they will thrive with new business models, new companies, etc. For others that aren't able to adjust and evolve, the picture actually is isn't quite so bright. And companies need to look at not just the risks they know exist because they happened before. I think what we've learned from this situation is we need to make projections to prepare for the risks that don't currently exist, actually. The phrase, I truly believe, is that the phrase "what if" has to find its way back into the business lexicon. I think we as banks, you know, the bank stress test is a very good example of that, and Corona or COVID-19 is a real life stress test, I would say. Against this backdrop, I think a greater pace of digitalizations comes at the forefront, and we are seeing a renewed focus from our clients on new online services, investments in telecoms and digital, but also healthcare infrastructure, of course, and ESG. Connectivity in general and the ability to get work done remotely is more important for our customers than ever right now. What we have been investing and developing our digital infrastructure, actually even before COVID-19 pandemic, to ensure that our banking services are always within their reach. And when it comes to Egypt, I think providing this digital lifeline has been crucial to Egyptian companies' supply chains. So we've witnessed an increase in digital transactions as an immediate response to COVID-19, as customers rerouted their business to HSBC using our digital channels and global reach to manage the risk of unforeseen disruption to payments. And this has been crucial for critical sectors for Egypt, like pharmaceutical and food supply. At a wider view, going forward, we believe that supply chains will start to become more regional. So these further challenges to globalization will continue, which in turn it will place increasing emphasis on regional trade agreements and regional supply chains. And we believe Egypt will be an important player in that respect. And we believe that also it will open up opportunities for FDIs in the country as global corporates look to diversify their global supply chains. Finally, I would say that the pandemic highlighted the interdependencies between the people and the planet and the need for a more balanced carbon footprint. That carbon footprint is something that should be a consideration of all businesses. And in Egypt, this is very much the case with the country's sustainable development strategy. And despite the current uncertainty, we're witnessing an increased interest for sustainable financing as Egypt and the wider region seeks to transform. And we're very pleased to be currently working with the Egyptian government on the issuance of its first green bond. To finish, I would say, this economic impact of COVID-19 is already significant and will continue over the coming weeks and months. HSBC has always been strong in times of crisis, and this is no exception. We're working very closely with our Egyptian clients and with our clients globally to continue supporting all of them during this unprecedented period of disruption. That's all for me, Ian.
Helmi, thank you very much indeed. And I'm now going to turn to you, Your Excellency. As Minister, I think we are exceedingly fortunate this morning that having you, with your past experience in being an expert on economics and then a very successful period in tourism, we're now looking at a world and we're looking at Egypt where the economy is it's tough for everyone in every country. And tourism, which matters so much to Egypt, I suspect, I shouldn't say this, but you're probably glad you're not the tourism minister when no one's allowed to travel. But you are now in the job to actually build the international cooperation going forward, both for the economy and tourism. So if I may, Your Excellency, I will hand over to you and we look forward to your contribution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ian, and welcome everyone who's joining us. Sir Jeffrey, thank you for being with us this morning, given your travel. Helmi, very nice to see you, and thank you for your remarks. The UK-Egypt relationship is a very unique one, and while I was Minister of Tourism, I will never forget His Excellency the Ambassador, who came to my office, and together we announced the return of British tourists to Egypt, to Sharm el-Sheikh actually in last October. So it was a very high moment, and we were looking forward to picking up in Sharm el-Sheikh, given the return of the British tourists who are very dear to us. But tides shift, things happen, and we are, the whole world now is facing the implications of COVID, which started as a health crisis, and then of course the implications just resonated across all sectors and all countries. And maybe at the outset, I just want to extend our appreciation to the British government and to particularly the ambassador here in Cairo for the collaboration that is taking place on different fronts that I'll talk about. Being the Minister of Tourism and seeing the numbers go up until in December 2019, we reached the highest revenues in Egypt's history. So I'm very happy that I was able to deliver that. But the works and the details of how we reached that, it comes from structural reforms. And if there's anything that COVID is teaching all of us, is that structural reforms matter, they need to continue. And that's the only way you are able, as a country or as a sector, to build resilience. A few lessons that I want to mention at the outset before I start a presentation. And in the presentation, I will just speak very briefly about some of the policies that the Egyptian government has taken to fend off the implications of COVID. And then I will focus in more detail on my role as Minister of International Cooperation, what we are doing Of course, before resuming this role, it was the Ministry of International Cooperation and Investment. Part of the cabinet change was that Ministry of Investment is not a ministry anymore. It's the General Authority for Investment, and it's under the auspices of the PM. But of course, as a member of the Economic Committee in the cabinet, we all discuss different policies that nonetheless try and pave the way for more investments. But a few things that stand out. Number one, no country is by itself right now. Everybody is being affected. Nobody has the silver bullet or the answer. There's a lot of trial and error that every government is going through, and a lot of shared experience that is taking place. And so this concept that multilateralism is going to be affected or weakened, I believe, on the contrary, this is a crisis that has shown that more cooperation is there, it's needed, whether it's on the health front or even on how we try to mitigate the economic implications from what we are all facing. Maybe if I can start with the presentation, and also maybe towards the end I will speak about the UK Africa Summit that took place in January, and I had the pleasure of participating, and we also with DFID came out with a joint statement that also shows the areas of cooperation between the Egyptian government and the United Kingdom in the period ahead through different initiatives and different projects. So just very quickly to go through a few things, and this presentation will be available for all participants, for those who want to take a closer look. But of course, what we are trying to do, all of us as governments, is really to navigate through this health issue, and make sure that we don't forget that there's life after COVID, and that we have to make sure that the economies and the levers that push it forward do exist. So in our case, we wanted to protect the population from the spread of the virus. We wanted to provide easier access to credit to help households smooth consumption, provide liquidity for firms to survive this disruption. And we wanted to expedite structural reforms through and beyond COVID. So we wanted to progress. So it's protect, provide, and progress. That's how I would sort of characterize the steps that were taken by the Egyptian government. I'll go through a few of those. If you can go to the next, yes. So, of course, the IMF characterized this crisis as the Great Lockdown. When you take a look at the World Economic Outlook that was published in April and then updated in July, all of us can see how much the downgrade in growth has taken place, and it's across all region, advanced economies, emerging economies, and nobody has been spared. Nonetheless, if we take a look at the Egyptian case, and we have to highlight that really at the beginning of this crisis, we entered with strong fiscal and foreign exchange buffers, and this was extremely important. We started an economic reform program in 2016 with the IMF. It was concluded in the summer of 2019. And because it had several policy reforms on the fiscal side, on the foreign exchange side, we entered 2020 with a good macroeconomic story, a good growth story. We were the highest growing economy in the Middle East. We continue to be that despite the calamity of COVID. When you take a look at the international projections for the region, Egypt is projected to still have positive growth, even though it is lower than what all of us had envisioned and projected. The other important issue is in balancing the trade-off between health and economic impact. Egypt did not have a full lockdown. We had partial lockdowns. There were curfews, and the movement or the change in the time of the curfew was something that was being tested by the government. Few topics, as Helmi was mentioning, that many things we thought would take years to implement just came very early, such as remote or access working from home. I mean, when you look at a government as big as Egypt, it would have been quite impossible to imagine a few months ago that really people could work from home and things could function and there wasn't disruption. So I think that is one of the important implications that took place. Something else which was very key for us as a government is to ensure that contrary our exports, our food exports increased to the region. And actually, despite aviation coming to a halt in many places, our planes, commercial planes, were used to actually export food to different parts of the Middle East. Of course, all of you know that on June 26th, the Executive Board of the IMF approved a standby agreement with Egypt in the amount of $5.2 billion. And this is a very important development in the sense that it shows that there's a framework, a macroeconomic framework with projections that will be made transparently available to everyone who's following Egypt. And this can also provide a lot of input to those who want to invest in the country. Just very quickly, some of the early measures that the government took, and this was, in end of March, beginning of April. Policies included fiscal measures, included monetary measures, cutting interest rates, particularly on small and medium enterprises, giving time and delaying payments on existing loans. The tourism sector was one of the sectors that got a lot of help from the government. On the fiscal side, there was a stimulus of $100 billion, which is close to 100 billion pounds, I'm sorry, which is close to 3% of GDP. This was very early on. And a very important level of discussion between the private sector and the Prime Minister, the Ministry of Finance, to basically see how we can provide the necessary support very early on in order to mitigate the implications of what was a disruption, of course, as was mentioned, in supply lines and so forth. So here, this is just more details by sector, what happened with respect to providing a tourism financing initiative. The real estate sector, which is quite important, also was given support. The stock exchange was also given support early on to basically ensure that the index is not fully or try and mitigate the implications of it. The other issues related to some tax exemptions for certain income brackets. So all of this was again to allow for not a complete halt in consumption. And Egypt is a big country, so this purchasing power continues, and we've seen it in crises in the past that despite having a dent, but still it is very much a big market. Economies of scale do matter. And that's why many of the firms do find it as an opportunity despite the implications. On the healthcare, also, of course, there was a lot of help early on with respect to allowances related to the doctors and the working of university hospitals. Agriculture, because of its importance, and also for food security, there were purchases of local wheat from the local farmers, again, because of the probability or the chances of having disruptions globally. The other issues related to sectoral support for health, education, social solidarity. So all of these were mechanisms and policies implemented by the government in the early stages around end of March, beginning of April. Trade and exports, again, the prices of gas that was supplied to firms was brought down. And these were some of the policies already being discussed in government, but they were brought forward. And that's why we say we expedite some of the things that already were being discussed. And this is again, one of the important, I don't want to say, I call them silver linings when it comes to the crisis. And here, when we take a look at what are some of the positives that we've seen, And we find that the trying to deal with the immediate socioeconomic challenges meant that the informal sector had to be looked at very quickly. It meant that the social protection and social safety agenda had to be widened. The financial inclusion, given the work from home and people not being able to go out as freely as before. So expediting the financial inclusion and digital reform agenda was there. And then, of course, one of the, the key segments of society that have been identified as a vulnerable group, and that is globally, not just we are not an exception, is women, and there has been also a movement in terms of trying to lead on women economic empowerment. So here we go through the details of these silver linings of some of the things that were expedited. So, for instance, when we take a look at the the labor force and the employment protection, SMEs, particularly those in tourism, housing for low income, all of those were given very preferential interest rates. Debt relief for individuals on payments on their credit cards were very important. And then regulations related to banks being able to actually function with electronic wallets were also sort of eased from the central bank in order to allow for these different policies to basically tie in together as a puzzle. And when we take a look at the social reforms, there was monetary compensation. And this is very important. We have, of course, a very big informal sector, and everyone was encouraged to register to be able to get the monetary compensation. And we have now more than 1.5 million people registered in a database. And this was very important that everyone now has a PIN. They know they've received this. They're in so this has been extremely positive. We have a committee that takes a look at the labor implications from COVID, and it has several agencies in the government as well as ministers. So we're putting together the policies that would really help very much in terms of formalizing these informal sectors. In terms of social protection programs, the safety net was widened. Of course, we have with the Ministry of Social Solidarity, a very successful program known as Takaful and Karama that had taken place several years ago. So it was the infrastructure for expanding this type of social protection was there, and it was expanded. With respect to payments for women in communities, that was also made possible given their work very closely with the Ministry of Social Solidarity. And there was an increase in pensions. So this is on gender parity and leading women economic empowerment. Egypt was the first country to do a policy tracker for policies related to women under COVID. It's published the update is done every week. It was picked up by UN Women as well. And here are many of the details in terms of what the government is doing with respect to COVID and women. Also, it's an opportunity to mention that Egypt is the first country in the Middle East and Africa to launch Closing the Gender Gap Accelerator with the World Economic Forum and the National Council for Women. It's a private-public platform that takes a look at the statistics very deeply, does a deep dive, and then identifies how we increase female participation, how we increase women in leadership roles, and how we try and create equal pay. So this is an initiative that we will maybe have a special webinar on, so that whether companies existing in Egypt want to participate or different institutions, it's a quite significant and important initiative. The other thing which is quite important, and it comes in the heart of what the world is talking about, that we don't want COVID to derail us from our sustainable development goals. If sustainable development goals used to be abstract pictures that only a few knew about, I think after COVID, each one of them has become more relevant to each individual, whether it's no poverty, no hunger, whether it's well-being and health, trying to have sustainable cities, connectivity, gender parity. All of these are becoming extremely important. Next. And then in the presentation, I just wanted to mention what we do as Ministry of International Cooperation. When we take a look at, I call it Ministry of Foreign Affairs does the political diplomacy. In our case here, we do the economic diplomacy. We try to push the frontiers of multilateralism, trying to have discussions with development partners, whether multilateral or bilateral, and try and see and align objectives in the country with those of our partners. So this is just, again, for those who don't know what the Ministry of International Cooperation is mandated with, we develop and strengthen economic cooperation between the country and other institutions, criteria for obtaining external financing. And here we talk about development financing, official development assistance. We follow up and monitor with national agencies that have acquired previously financing and see how we make sure that projects are completed. And then, of course, with the United Nations, we are considered the liaise with them from the government side. So we can just go next. Next. Yeah, so here, a few things that we have been focusing on. And on April 2nd, we launched what we call a multi-stakeholder platform. And the idea here is that, you know, as resources globally are becoming more scarce, it's very important for countries to prioritize. And it's very important that we create complementarity between the different international financial agencies, and also when it comes to trying to have a sequence, so that if we are engaging in a project, more than one development partner would come in, there would be complementarities. We would sort of leverage on the comparative advantage that one would have versus the other, and so forth. So this is just to give an idea of what we mean by the multi-stakeholder platform. We've done it with different ministers over the past few weeks. A Minister of Public Enterprises, because of the reforms that are taking place there. Yesterday was agriculture. Today we have something with transportation. But here are just examples of where more than one development partner have come together to provide sort of input, whether through technical assistance or financial packages. For of course, transportation is a very important sector for Egypt, and we have projects that include AFD, EBRD, EIB, with the Ministry of Transportation. That's one example. We have other examples related to green growth, and this is a Ministry of Electricity, has a very ambitious and important policy framework till 2035, a strategy. And here also we have more than one international development partner coming in to help in the implementation of that. We have another project that was very, very timely and important given COVID. It was with the Egyptian Red Crescent, USAID, Ministry of Social Solidarity, and then we have the private sector, Uber, to basically ensure that the workers and the volunteers could actually provide the help needed during this time. And then finally, just as another example, we had UNDP with one of our leading NGOs actually providing assistance to women in Upper Egypt, where they would produce masks. And so this was also a very important story of effective development cooperation. So I just wanted to mention that we are trying to put all of this within a context, within a narrative. We call it the global partnership narrative. And this narrative is based on, when we talk about projects, these projects have to benefit people, and they have to be identified as either private sector, public-private partnership. And then we try and relate the objectives of these projects with purpose, and those purposes are the SDGs. So our sort of global, I don't want to go through the whole part here, but our basically global partnership narrative is people and projects and purpose. So this is what you will find the Ministry of International Cooperation always pushing for in any bilateral or multilateral agreement that we do. It's a way to create more affinity to the idea of financing for development. And everybody's looking in 2030 to know exactly what has been achieved in terms of SDGs. So people are at the core of any project, and then projects are identified, and then projects in action, whether we have entrepreneurship, and the UK has been a partner in several of important projects related to health, entrepreneurship, education. And then purpose, of course, we have 17 goals to basically rely on and say that each project was able to link to one or more of these goals. And then something else which is quite important and we're doing with our partners today is SDG mapping. So we are taking a look at the different projects that we have as Ministry of International Cooperation. It's around $25 billion over the past few years. And the idea is for the projects that exist today with each partner, we are identifying how we can map it to the SDGs. And we have task force that are looking at that, the project purpose, the SDG definition, project mapping, cross-cutting themes. And we have been able to create one round of this SDG mapping. And as you can see from the chart, this is basically how we get the 287 projects and split them up into the various SDGs. So this is sort of something else that we are working very much on, and it's going to be hopefully one of the leading efforts for the government of Egypt, and we hope to finish this quite soon and publish it. Maybe a few words on the UK Africa Summit that took place in January that I attended, and there's a press release that came out that also identifies areas of cooperation. They include in terms of health, education, as I mentioned, SMEs, as well as of course the trade negotiations or the trade updates that Sir Jeffrey had mentioned. I'll probably stop here. The idea was to give some background on what the government of Egypt has done with respect to policies to mitigate COVID, and also highlight a little bit what the Ministry of International Cooperation is mandated to do and what are the activities that we have been doing lately. Thank you very much.
Minister, thank you so much for that. That was, I know you had to take a deep breath and you were having to go probably more quickly. I think you could have taken the whole day to give us the full content of that. I know there are going to be a number of questions, but before we turn to questions, I would just like to ask for a contribution from His Excellency Ambassador Tariq Adol. Ambassador, are you there? Would you care to say something? You need to come off mute. There we are. We can hear you now, Ambassador. Ambassador, we can hear you. Thank you.
Good. Well, good morning to you all, and it's very good to see you, although it is still virtually. But I think it's important to have those sorts of meetings, even if we go virtually. I would just like to say that the Embassy of Egypt to the United Kingdom is very happy to be part of the organization of this webinar. And welcome Dr. Al-Mashat, the Minister for International Cooperation. And thank you very much for your presentation, Your Excellency. I would just like to say a few words on this occasion. First, to say that both Egypt and the United Kingdom have been working very closely in those very difficult times. We have been in uncharted waters, which has been incumbent upon us to improvise on a lot of things. I think we have done well, given the circumstances. On the part of Egypt, we have been successful in repatriating more than 13,000 Britons that were in Egypt to go back to the United Kingdom over the last couple of months. We have also taken a very important decision, I believe, in waiving the export license for some of the PPEs that we export to the United Kingdom. This has allowed a certain batch of more than 300,000 surgical gowns to be exported to the United Kingdom. That took part 1.5 months ago, at a time when the NHS was in need of those PPEs. So we are happy to be part of this. On the other side, the United Kingdom has been working very closely with the Egyptian government in fulfilling a list of Egyptian needs during this time of crisis. We hope that this continues. I would just like to highlight very quickly what Sir Jeffrey Donaldson mentioned about the importance of getting the trade association agreement between the United Kingdom and Egypt very soon. We hope that we would have one in hand before the end of this year, when the United Kingdom is no longer part of the association agreement with the European Union. We have almost finalized this agreement. There is maybe a couple of technical issues that needs to be settled. We hope that it will be settled very soon. And in this regard, also, we hope that the visit of Secretary of State Dominic Raab to Egypt, which we hope will take place soon. That was a visit that was supposed to take place last May, will take place very soon. We hope that we would have a trade agreement in place on that time. It is very important to have this trade agreement, because this is an instrument that would ensure there is no disruption to the trade flow between the two countries. It's not a permanent agreement. It is just an agreement that would allow the transition from the end of this year. We hope that the two countries would engage starting next year in a full-fledged free trade agreement between the two countries. One final point is, and I think Minister Al-Mashat will know exactly what I'm talking about, since she was Minister of Tourism of Egypt. We hope that with the measures that many Egyptian hotels and resorts have taken, we will be able to receive once again British tourists to Egypt in general, but more in particular to areas such as the Red Sea resorts and Sharm el-Sheikh. Those are areas that have seen very low transmission rate of COVID-19. Plus, the resorts in those towns have taken many measures that would ensure the safety of tourists once they decide to come back. So we hope that in the next review by the British government, we hope that Egypt would be part of those countries that would be allowed, that British tourists, British citizens would be allowed to travel to, at least to those areas like I mentioned in Sharm el-Sheikh and the Red Sea resorts, even in the north coast of Egypt. So once again, thank you very much, and I wish you all the best of luck.
Ambassador, thank you very much indeed. We've been getting some Q&As in. So I think for all of you who have been speaking, when we look at the questions, I may look for help on all of them, but as you would expect, most of them will be aimed for you, Your Excellency Minister, in coming through. May I just say, sort of the I think it was one of the quotes from America from the Obama administration at one point, which is never waste a good crisis. And it seems to me that with what you've been describing of the moves from the Egyptian government, there are some very important and significant moves that you've actually been able to make during this. I mean, in particular, I think that the registration of the informal sector, which has been a problem for 1,000 years or something, it feels though that's been great news to move forward in that. And all the work that you're now able to do on gender parity. And I think exactly as the Chamber, it looks to me as though Egypt is probably taking a world-leading approach in terms of trying to make progress, not just talking about it, but actually getting something done. Before I turn to some of the questions from the audience, clearly to implement the changes and to hold everything together, you need everyone in the country pulling together and pretty well following the rules. One of the things that I think has probably been a surprise to us is the discipline that has probably happened in the, albeit it was a limited lockdown compared to what we have seen in some places in Europe, including the UK, but the discipline of following the rules and that. So can you say anything about what the government did in terms of how you communicated with the population to get everyone on side?
I mean, I think, well, first the quote that, there's always an opportunity and a crisis comes from Churchill. So that's, it comes from your side. No, I think when we take a look at the Egyptian government during this crisis, I think there's been a very high level of coordination between ministers. And I think the Prime Minister was very transparent in his public appearances on a regular basis, communicating with the citizens. We are doing this curfew because we are trying to, so there's always an explanation. Even when one policy measure was changed or reintroduced, there was people were very interested to follow exactly what was being communicated from the government side. There was not just the regular press releases, but actually live communication, which was extremely, extremely important. And I think that really helped in terms of the credibility through the crisis. So definitely open channels of communication were there. And it is as I mentioned, the citizen in Cairo is the same as the citizen in London, is the same as the citizen in Washington. Everybody is facing this sort of risk in a similar fashion. And of course, having social media where you are seeing what's happening elsewhere also creates a level of awareness and carefulness, if you will.
All right, thank you. Now, I know Helmi had a question, so if you can come off mute, Helmi, would you like to pose your question?
Yeah, thank you very much, Your Excellency, for the presentation. Actually, my question relates to your involvement in the investment committee, and I would love to hear your views on the level of non-oil FDIs in Egypt and what additional measures Egypt can take to try to attract, additional FDIs and promote the private sector. Thank you.
There's the GAFI, which is the investment authority right now, is actually looking through each of the items within the doing business report and addressing whether it's legislative change or land allocation. So there's a very meticulous effort that's being done, and hopefully next week we are going to hold a multi-stakeholder platform on that topic. So I will definitely make sure that we send it to the Egyptian British Chamber, and you can spread it out to your participants as well. And the idea is, even if the ranking is not being changed now because steps are being implemented, but what we are doing on each one of them is going to become discussed in this platform so that people can see the different measures that are taking place. So it's land allocation is a very important one. There were some legislative changes that needed to take place, and so some laws now are with Parliament waiting for ratification. The other thing is on the cost of energy. As we saw, there were some outstanding issues for several years that have been addressed, making sure that also access to finance from the different initiatives that the central bank has taken under COVID, whether it's directive for certain sectors or lower interest rates in general. So all of these are some of the important steps. The other thing that you know, we have not completely locked down. So this means that you know, this opportunity of well, yeah, work calling. So it's also very important that for firms and so forth, that this, you know, the activity of purchasing, people going out and being able to still consume are also opportunities. The concept of green recovery, and Egypt has done very well with respect to renewable energy and the different projects. And the UK was, and some of its firms were with us on the BIM ban project. So there are certain projects that we are still continuing with in terms of whether it's on the agriculture sector, with respect to electricity, also on transport. So there are several areas where firms can find opportunities.
Thank you. May I come now to one of the questions which come through from Alia Mubayad that has been following Egypt for some time. Alia is asking a question of, with your ministry's role in mobilizing the external funding, are you in a position to share estimates for 2021 external financing needs and the target of the government from both public and private sources? And added to that, how do you expect through the multi-stakeholders you will mobilize the funding? I think you touched on that a little bit in your presentation, but a little bit more insight, please.
Well, first, let me say hello, Alia, and we miss you, and we hope to see you on your different investor trips soon. But you know, the financing gap for any country today is one which evolves given the changing circumstances. So a few months ago, with the disruption in the oil market, you know, different countries were estimating their financing gaps in a certain way. Today, with things more calm, the financing gap keeps on you know, being updated. But of course, having a standby agreement with the IMF and having that those documents published will shed light for everyone in terms of that particular question. What we do is, you know, the funding that comes through the multilateral or bilateral development agencies, and I just want to mention here, it doesn't only come to the sovereign, so it doesn't only come to the government, but also private sector gets a share of that. And it gets a share of it either through IFC, direct financing for firms, and that is happening. And we do announce them as they come, and there is a lot in the pipeline. It's close to $1 billion there. It also comes to credit lines with Egyptian banks that will be used to help the private sector, SMEs, and so forth. So there's an element of creating liquidity in the market so that, you know, firms continue functioning and new firms can come in and so forth. So that's one aspect of the type of financing that comes in. The other type, which comes to the government, and the idea of the multi-stakeholder platform. Yesterday, for example, in agriculture, the Ministry of Agriculture has certain priorities. It wants to do horizontal expansion of products. It wants to create mechanization with respect to irrigation and with respect to the type of cultivation that takes place. It wants to create more digital savvy farmers, if you will, and focus on whether it's dairy products or meat. So having these priorities set out in a strategic meeting, you had IFAD, FAO, IFC, World Bank, African Development, everybody was there. And what we do is have a template where the different development partners can come in and say where they want to provide this type of financing. We have things already in the pipeline, and those are agreements which are signed on transportation, electricity, and others. And what we are trying to do going forward is to look at the priority sectors and ensure that priority project do find financing through development partners, actually.
Thank you, Minister. We are very tight on time, and I think I think we would probably only manage one more. There's one question which has come up from Dr. Amra Hasnain, who is, and you talked about the role of the ministry as being sort of economic diplomacy, and he's picking up the point that US aid to Egypt was amongst the highest in the region. Today, we're seeing countries like Jordan and Tunisia getting much more. And politics clearly is part of this, and yet it's economic. So when do you believe that Egypt may go back to perhaps its previous levels with US aid?
I mean, US aid is one of many partners, and US aid has been doing very good work in Egypt, and we'll be announcing, actually we have a signing on Thursday for the new 6 pillars of engagement with USAID that include health, higher education, things on women empowerment, governance. So all of this will, you know, so I think that when I say economic diplomacy, it's not just securing the funds, but also making sure that they're meaningful. And that's why when we say PNP, we want to make sure that with the stakeholders, with our partners, there's very clear complementarity, there's very clear understanding of where everyone comes in, and we try to avoid redundancies just because we want to manage the process in a more transparent and more constructive way.
Thank you very much. Minister, look, I know your time is very valuable. I mean, for those of us that have done a lot of these webinars and watched a lot, the odd phone call coming through is a very minor interruption. I mean, we've had children, dogs and everything else appearing in other webinars which have gone, but you've been very helpful to us this morning. I think, and if I could squeeze in just one last question, if I may. As the Chamber, we believe very strongly in seeing Egypt from the UK as being potentially a hub, but definitely a gateway into trading with the rest of Africa. The UK has got long relationships with parts of Africa, but because of the relatively small time difference, the relatively small distance, and also Egypt's position as the entry point if we're flying south. So is there anything in the activities which you've come up which is looking to boost that anymore? Or is, I mean, following the Africa Summit this year, we were very excited about what might happen. Is there anything new that's come up in the recent past?
No, I mean, the only thing that is, that I don't want to say new, but maybe re-emphasize is the idea of regional supply chains and local supply chains. So that just re-emphasizes the importance of the links within the continent. And as you mentioned, it's an opportunity for Egypt. And we are trying to see with the different institutions within the region, within the continent, how we might leverage on some of our comparative advantage to push forward.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Minister, look, thank you. Thank you also to Ambassador Tariq from London, Helmi in Cairo. Thank you all for your participation this morning. I think on a small admin issue, I understand, Minister, your office is going to provide the presentation for us so we can make that available to everyone who has been participating today. I want to thank you all for coming and listening, and most of all, Minister, yet again, for a superb presentation, very clear and very exciting. So thank you. I mean, it's most encouraging from a UK point of view. So thank you all for coming. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you.
Thank you.